All right, it is 6:05. Thank you guys all for joining our third webinar with Jumpstart, and we're super excited to be hosting this one. There always seems to be a lot of engagement on these webinars as well. It seems like everyone's really interested in startups, including me now, to be honest, since all these sessions have been happening. So super grateful for Jumpstart partnering up with us to kind of present this opportunity to our community. Today's session is slightly different. What we're going to be doing is we are going to be delving into two startups specifically, and some graduates that have kind of gone through Jumpstart's program are going to kind of be telling you about the startups, their sector, and their experience as well. So really kind of looking forward to it. The startups in question, one of them is called Zero Gravity, and they're a social impact startup dedicated to helping students from underprivileged backgrounds access opportunities with employers and top universities. And then we also have Vira Health as well, which is a Femtech startup. So yeah, I'm going to kind of hand it over to you, Ellie, to kind of coordinate and get things started. But guys, drop all your questions in the chat, anything that you want to answer about the program, about the startups, and also as well, feel free to kind of share this on your platforms on LinkedIn, Instagram, and talk about the session and what you've gained from it as well. But yeah, I'll hand it over to you, Ellie.
Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, thanks everyone for coming to yet another webinar with Beyond Education. We've kind of been blown away by all the engagement we've been getting so far and sort of seeing how many people are just as excited about startup careers as we are. So yeah, like Stephen said, this webinar is going to be a little bit different, a little bit less talking from me and my end. I promise only a tiny bit at the start. And I'm going to hand over the mic mainly to some brilliant Jumpstart alumni who are working in tech for good startups and femtech startups. And so yeah, this webinar is all going to be about learning more about the Jumpstart program and deep diving into some specific startup sectors and hearing some great alumni stories. So to begin with, though, I am still going to do a quick introduction to Jumpstart for anyone who's missed a webinar before or just doesn't know anything about the program. Promise it'll be brief, but yeah, a quick overview of how Jumpstart program works and how the application process works. Then I'm going to hand over the mic to Tom and Charlotte at Zero Gravity, who are going to talk about all things tech for good and their startup experiences, before handing over again to Martha at Vira Health, and she's going to talk all about her femtech startup and her startup journey more generally. And yeah, like Stephen mentioned, please drop as many questions as you like in the chat, directed at me or directed at any of the alumni, and we're happy to answer any of them at the end of the session. So first of all, what is Jumpstart? At Jumpstart, we exist to make startups a valuable career path for everyone. We do this by running a graduate scheme for startup careers. Every month, every 1 to 2 months, really, we select and train recent graduates and we place them into London's most exciting tech startups. By recent graduates, we mean anyone who's graduated in the last 0 to 2 years. And when I say London, I say that because most of our startups are based in London, but you don't have to be based in London to join them. We have a lot of remote positions available, and you can also move to London once you secure a role as well. And once you start working your startup, you'll join alongside a cohort of other grads, typically 30 to 40 other grads who'll be starting at the same time as you, and you'll receive ongoing career mentorship and support. So how does the program work? It's typically a 4-week program. On the first week of the program, we invite you to what we call our startup spotlights. This is where we bring in 40 plus founders of loads of different startups in some of the most exciting sectors in the startup world in the UK, and they'll pitch to you about their company and their role over Zoom. Basically, they'll talk for 5 minutes on the company, 5 minutes on the role, and there'll be 5 minutes for you to quiz them on anything to do with the company, the role, their mission, their culture, just anything that will make you determine whether it's right for you, basically. At the end of the week, we ask you then to pick your top 5 startups that you can go straight to interview with. We'll make all the introductions and then you can take it from there. And before you start interviewing, we'll give you some training on our best interview practice and best workplace skills so you can smash the interview, but then also smash the job when you start. And then we also provide you ongoing support once you start your job in the form of mentorship. We'll match you with some of the top mentors in the startup world. Some training, we give ongoing training support from Jumpstart itself. So recent one was how to sort of deal with managers and things like that. And then also you get support from the Jumpstart community. This is a really active, vibrant community. It's now got 200 plus graduates in it. We run socials throughout the year, which is an opportunity for you to meet loads of really exciting, fun people. And yeah, it's a really great way to kickstart your professional network when you first finish university. So in case you don't know, what are startups? In very simple terms, startups are early stage businesses in the tech sector. So they're often digitally based businesses. They're doing something innovative, different, exciting, and they're often VC funded. VC stands for venture capital, and it basically functions like a bank for startups. They provide different levels of funding to startup companies, and this is the funding that they need to give them that potential to grow fast and like become big and sort of reach and have loads of impact on tons and tons of people. So yeah, loads of startups have the potential to grow fast over the next few years. This sort of diagram at the bottom here is just sort of to show the scope at which startups can be startups. So on the left, we have Sunsave, which is a solar panel startup that has about 10 people or less. Then we have Vira Health, which has significantly more people, but still counts as a startup. And then you have Monzo on the right, which I guess no longer would count as a startup, but still has elements of startup culture and was a startup once. And that has significantly more people than Vira Health. So yeah, startups come in all sorts of shapes and sizes and still count as startups. And in terms of startup industries that we work with a ton of different industries, and this is just scraping the surface here, but we work with Femtech, so this is startups in the finance sector. We work for tech for good companies, so Tom and Charlotte will be talking a little bit more about tech for good and zero gravity. We work with health tech startups, so Vira Health comes under that, but also Femtech is also a subsector of health tech. We work with e-commerce startups, so this is all about selling a product. We work with climate tech startups. We work with deep tech and AI startups, which is obviously a really hot topic at the moment. And we work with education startups, so ed tech companies as well. And so, yeah, a really wide range of industries. And typically anyone who goes through the program finds a sector that excites them. In terms of roles that you can go into, these are just 4 of the most common roles that grads go into. So you've got founders associate. This is basically where you function as like the right-hand person to a founder in the business. So you sort of get involved in everything in the business, from strategy to operations to project management and things like that. It's a really great role to get involved in if you sort of can envision yourself starting your own business one day, because you get a real taste of what it's like to be a founder. Other than that, lots of our grads get involved in marketing, which is all about spreading the word about your business, getting people engaged and excited about what your company can offer. And then you've got operations, which is all about working on the inner workings of the business, working out sort of problems and breaking them down into their constituent parts, and then coming up with like exciting solutions that can optimize the company. And then you have analysts as well. And this is basically, if you're really into crunching numbers and like looking at loads of data, this is a really great role for you. So we've sort of been given lots of different bits of like data, and like you can use that to basically solve problems about the company. And again, like sort of operations, all about optimizing the business. And then I've also written or something else at the end, because as you'll see in this like whole webinar, lots of our grads go into a ton of different roles that don't necessarily come under one of these 4 different categories. And yeah, basically there's a lot of scope for different roles you can go into in the startup world. How do I apply? So the application process for Jumpstart is really, really simple. First of all, you need to write a CV. And if you've already written a CV, then yeah, you've passed the first step. But if you haven't, we've connected a QR code just here, which links to our CV article, which is all of our top tips on how to write a great CV for startups, and also includes a CV template. So you can sort of write the best CV possible if you don't know where to begin. After you've written your CV, then submit a quick application form, which should take less than a minute. It includes submitting your CV and then answering a few basic questions about yourself. Then we ask you to answer a written question, which should take no more than 30 minutes. And it's just to test your written comms and things like that. And then if you pass those stages, we'll invite you to an interview with someone on the Jumpstart team. This interview should last about 40 minutes. And it's basically there to test your motivations for the startup world and your suitability for different startup roles that we have on offer. And once you pass all 4 of those stages, you're invited to join the Jumpstart program. So I think you've heard enough from me about Jumpstart. I'm going to hand over the mic to our brilliant alumni. So you're going to be hearing from Charlotte and Tom first at Zero Gravity, before passing over to Martha at Vira Health. So I will stop sharing my screen now, and I will pass over to Tom and Charlotte.
Thank you so much, Ellie. I will make an attempt to share my screen successfully now. Hopefully everyone can see that and not see my LinkedIn. Naturally, in startups, we spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. Sweet. So happy to introduce myself now. My name's Tom, and I was on Jumpstart in the cohort 9 back in January to February of 2022. And I'm now working at Zero Gravity alongside Charlotte.
Hi everyone, I'm Charlotte. I am founder associate here at Zero Gravity. So yeah, also on Jumpstart 9 with Tom back in nearly a year ago now, which is crazy. But yeah, really excited to meet you all and tell you a bit about Zero Gravity and Tech for Good. So yeah, just quickly what we're going to run through today. So a little bit about our Zero Gravity mission, what we do, and a little bit more about the kind of wider Tech for Good startup sector. A little bit about what makes our team and culture and kind of how that links back into kind of more general startup roles and kind of like the kind of differences that we've experienced versus kind of previous experience we've had. A little bit more in detail about our roles and what that actually involves when we know it. And then a little bit about more how Zero Gravity works as a platform and what we do. So our kind of high performance membership community and the opportunities and outlook that encompasses. So yeah, first of all, just a bit about our mission and Tech for Good. So here at Zero Gravity, we propel the UK's brightest students from the lowest income areas of the UK into top universities and top employers through our tech, mentoring and scholarships. So what does that actually mean? So taking it right back to kind of our social mission and the problem we're trying to solve. Talent is spread evenly, opportunity is not. And I think kind of when you think about that statement, it's something that is so kind of embarrassingly obvious in society that it often goes unsaid. And that is the reason that ultimately social mobility has been stagnant for a generation, and opportunity is still highly dependent on where you're from, who you know, the access to the networks you might have, and the different opportunities that brings. So just a little stat there to kind of hammer that home. Students from the most disadvantaged areas in the UK are 6 times less likely to get into a highly selected university than their more affluent peers. So I think that really just kind of solidifies that talent is spread evenly, opportunity is not kind of mission statement that is behind everything that we do. And yeah, at the current rate of progress with kind of social mobility being addressed as it is, the social mobility gap will remain as it is for another 332 years. So if you just think about kind of, 332 years, none of us can really fathom it, but the kind of the talent that we're kind of risking missing out on, all the ideas, all the innovations, all the leaders, as well as the absolutely billions of pounds that they will generate for GDP. So what have we done so far? I'll kind of just take a bit of a wider overview of what we've done, and then Tom will delve into a little bit more about the how we do it. But we launched in 2020 from our founder, Joe's student bedroom. So he launched Zero Gravity with the last £200 of his student loan, after having kind of lived his own Zero Gravity journey, growing up in a low-income household in West Yorkshire, making the journey to Oxford University, and then ultimately now founding Zero Gravity to kind of help propel other students on a similar journey to him. So since that launch, we've mentored 3,000 students plus from low-income backgrounds into highly selected universities throughout the UK, and that includes 400 plus Oxbridge students. We're on track to mentor another 5,000 this year. And those Oxbridge offers starting to come in today, so TBC onto what that number will hopefully rise up to. And yeah, success stories have been featured across the UK press, BBC News, Channel 4, The Times, and the Mail Online. How do we do that? So we've done 20 plus hours of one-to-one video mentoring sessions, and 250,000 plus mentoring messages have been shared on our platform. So really using tech to power everything we do and kind of create those connections between people, but at the scale that tech can allow that to happen. And according to our UCAS impact report, Zero Gravity students are 40% more likely to achieve top university places than they would be than comparable applicants. And we're now moving on to the careers space. So we're now partnering with top graduate employers such as HSBC and KPMG to propel hundreds of our Zero Gravity members into top graduate careers. So kind of taking them on that one platform, one journey from school through to uni. What is a Zero Gravity member? Who is a Zero Gravity member? A Zero Gravity member is a high potential student from an area or situation of disadvantage in the UK. So that is the top 15% of academic potential and the bottom 40% of social advantage. And that is roughly around 50,000 students each year from all 4 corners of the UK. So a pretty huge target market that we're here to propel into top careers. So just a case study example, we've got Millie, who is now studying classics at Oxford University. She's only the 3rd student from a travelling family to be offered a place at university, and her story is pretty remarkable. So I can leave you guys to have a look at that yourself in the Times, but yeah, it's pretty inspiring. And ultimately linking it back to Tech for Good, which Tom and I have both chosen to work in. Can't really recommend it enough, but in terms of like kind of taking a social issue and letting tech do the work. So ultimately every kind of problem that we'd like to solve in society, actually thinking about how can we take tech to make it scalable, and for us specifically, how do we make social mobility scalable? And in a nutshell, we do it through our very catchy, sophisticated contextual eligibility and matching algorithms, which ultimately is our tech platform, which I won't go into too much detail in now because we're out of time. But ultimately that sort of manifests itself in digital one-to-one mentoring, and an actively managed community platform of top students in the UK. And what does that kind of mean on the day-to-day for us, and why have we chosen to work in a startup and in a Tech for Good startup in particular? So first of all, just going to kind of touch on the culture and values that are that kind of drive everything we do here. Again, I won't go into too much depth about these specifically because these are our kind of zero gravity specific values, but I think we wanted to include this because we both think it's kind of widely applicable to startups in general, and sort of in particular kind of really practicing what you preach and not having kind of values and kind of mission statements that every company ultimately aims for. Like, we kind of have 4 key pillars that you can actually actively see in your day-to-day work, your meetings, your working relationships, everything you do. So ultimately for us, that is stand up straight, make it happen, run towards danger, and change it up. So all about kind of standing up for what you believe in, both on kind of a bigger scale in terms of the mission and the values, but also on a day-to-day basis, sort of saying what you think, sort of holding people accountable and really kind of having your voice heard. Make it happen in terms of, in typical startup fashion, there's a lot to do in quite a short period of time. So just really getting stuff done. Run towards danger, taking those risks, trying new things, and giving everything a go for the first time ultimately. And then that kind of links into change it up, which is just really innovation at the heart of everything we do, and trying new things every day. This is the team, which I won't go into detail with again, but just for a bit of context, we have grown since January last year. We've grown from a team of 3 to a team of 24. So that is from our seed funding round through to our Series A funding round, which will be around Q3 of this year. And then from that point onwards, we'll be sort of 2.5xing in size. So kind of going up to around the kind of 70 mark. So you can kind of see the growth of how the team builds out. And it's been really cool for us to see. Since we joined, I think we were employee 10 and 11. So it's been cool to see kind of the doubling of the company and how that's worked, and how kind of job roles are built out to fit the needs of the company at that time. And kind of you can see where the gaps kind of appear and how that kind of then gets filled out. So then just into what we actually do. So I will just quickly summarize what I do, and then I'll stop rambling on and let Tom take over. But I am founder associate at Zero Gravity. So as I mentioned at the start, founder associate is ultimately working beside the founder on a bit of everything in the company, really. So exposure to all parts of the business, good and bad, but kind of the day-to-day, the week-to-week is incredibly varied. I work on things from kind of team building to recruitment to legalities to business development to different areas of the strategies, to the actual product, to fundraising, like lots of different areas of the business. And yeah, love the variety of it. Find it hard to say in a nutshell what my job role is, but I think that's kind of the definition of a founder associate. So yeah, on to Tom.
Yeah, so as undergraduate talent lead, my Jumpstart journey started a little bit before Jumpstart, actually. I came out of university in 2021 and was keen to go into a graduate scheme because while I was at university, I was doing a year abroad out in Australia. And I actually had a bit of experience in a edtech startup out there, very small team, 4 people. But that sort of gave me a little bit of insight into the startup world, and opened my eyes to what it could look like, the sort of the effect you have on your work, the adaptability you have to show, like how much impact you can have from one day's work, and then going into a grad scheme after uni, which I did for 8 months in total. I found that personally, it wasn't reflective. It was great on a day-to-day basis for learning and having access to some very experienced people within a graduate scheme, but it wasn't quite for me. So that's when I decided to go to Jumpstart, and I applied for the Jumpstart program. And through that, I found Zero Gravity alongside Charlotte, and I went into the undergraduate talent lead role here at Zero Gravity. And essentially what that role looks like is managing all of our pipelines of incoming students across the UK. Mainly our undergraduates. We have another team member that manages our pipeline of students from A-levels, but I manage all the students from universities around the UK. So mostly that would involve working directly with universities in terms of partnerships, but it also has a bit of a marketing aspect. So I do a lot of ambassador programs. I do a lot of outreach in terms of email campaigns and social media campaigns. But what's something I've noticed, as Charlotte was mentioning earlier, about how the team growing shows how the roles are very adaptable to what that company looks like at the time, is that when I started my role, I was doing a lot of our brand team's role in terms of marketing, making lots of materials on Canva, quite poorly, and lots of other things like that. Whereas now I get a lot more scope to focus on actual university partnerships and becoming more of an account manager and a long-term sort of strategic manager in terms of working with other teams. And yeah, having more of a day-to-day role that's focused with those sorts of things, as opposed to having a more cross-functional role. So in terms of our opportunities and outlook, Charlotte's spoken a lot to our mission in terms of the problem at hand with social mobility and how Zero Gravity is trying to solve that. But now I'm going to jump into exactly how we are solving it and what are the opportunities look like for us in our roles and the company moving forward in the future. So the big one is that weakening the link between background and achievement in the UK could contribute up to 140 billion pounds to GDP each year by 2050. Now, what this means is that where in the past social mobility has been very much on the agenda for companies, what it is now is an actual commercial imperative. Companies are focusing their attention to find socially mobile talent that's really, really intelligent, but obviously it normally lacks the sort of the network advantage and the network around them to find out about those opportunities, such as a student growing up in a rural part of the country that perhaps doesn't have a parent who went through a professional career, not having access to that network, not then being able to go and find opportunities to get work experience, all that sort of thing. We call this a network advantage, and it creates a lot of imposter syndrome for those sorts of students. So we've genuinely believed that we can radically increase social mobility, but also make it in commercial imperative in terms of making it into a business. A lot of organizations in the past that have worked with social mobility have been like charity functions, and that simply is great, but it's not quite as scalable as what we're trying to achieve with tech. So by creating a tech platform around this, where we can scale this up to thousands and thousands of students per year, we're really making it much more of a commercial opportunity and really supporting people in terms of their lifetime earnings, as well as supporting UK GDP. So how are we doing that? Well, we have sort of 3 entry points for students across the platform. The first one is at A-level age, where students can join from their state schools. They join via being referred by their teachers, by their schools, and we currently have 400 schools that are partnered with Zero Gravity. The second one is at university. So we have university students that join from all range of backgrounds because our students mentor students that are currently going into university on those journeys, but they also access our into-work programs that get them into great companies like HSBC and KPMG. And then there's Into Life, which is sort of the future Series A and onwards ambition of Zero Gravity, which is the next steps. Once we partnered with these graduate employers, we see the membership with Zero Gravity as being a full-on membership that you hold for life. So Zero Gravity is something that people hold close to them, and they continue to mentor students, they continue to mentor their peers as they go through their professional careers and onwards into their lives. So in terms of our actual membership, we bring ambitious students together to build incredible futures. Through tech, we can build a real community of really high potential students that come together on our platform, that build new connections, that build new opportunities for one another and really thrive in their futures. And that starts from A-level, but carries on all throughout university and on into graduate careers. And this all happens through sort of 3 pillars. So the first one, there's Discover. when a student joins at A-level age, they discover a lot about their university journey, like which universities they would like to attend, which are the best. They can ask questions on our community around which universities have the best, sort of provisions for certain types of students, which courses have the sort of best entry rates and all that sort of thing. But they can also contribute. So any student that joins the platform can contribute in terms of mentoring an A-level student. If you're a current undergraduate, you can contribute by providing opportunities to other students, and you can accelerate your own opportunities, which is that third pillar there. Accelerate your own opportunities by building your leadership potential, by getting recognized experience on your CV by the time you leave university, or you leave your current graduate position, and you accelerate into those graduate positions onwards. So here's an example of one of those students that's really thrived upon that membership basis at the moment. Maitree's one of our students that came through Zero Gravity as a school student. She then had a mentor that helped her into King's College London. And she's also then went on to join our internship in the summer that I'll talk to a little bit more just in a few slides' time. And she's now matched with a career mentor who's propelling her into a role at KPMG. So that's what we really mean by that Zero Gravity membership, is having that opportunity at all points of your journey through education to get the network and the community around you that's going to help propel you into those top opportunities. Flipping the script on internships. So this is our first internship that we ran internally in the summer. Personally, that was one of Charlotte's big tasks when you came in, talking about being adaptable in your roles. Like, you jump between a lot of different things, and Charlotte organised and delivered a full-on internship for our students over the summer. So it was a 6-week program that took place here in London. And we really wanted to change this up in terms of providing accommodation for our students and removing those financial barriers. So it was a paid internship where we were provided 2 weeks London accommodation. And there was also no suits allowed, because we're very casual and very easygoing within the office. But then there's also 4 weeks where it was part-time remote too. And within that, we really wanted the interns to be working on something that was very relative to what we were working on, rather than running out and getting coffees and all of those usual internship things you hear about. We wanted to make sure that our interns were really involved. So they were actually building out the foundations of the career platform that our students like Maitri, like the 200 other students that are currently on these programs are currently using. They were researching all the different pathways, getting involved in tech, in the program management, and everything else that went into those programs. And also, by having this pool of talent that within the platform, something that we're really keen to do is find opportunities for that talent, so that we can internally hire that talent, for example, as we continue to grow. Once we double at Series A, we will be hiring more internally from our students that have come through that Zero Gravity pipeline. For example, Natalie, who was a member for 4 years, is now a founder associate to one of our executive directors, Ian. And Yasir too is also working on a part-time data project alongside us, I believe is at UCL. So the overall mission we're going for is to provide these students with the opportunity to come together and build ambitious futures, forming a UK-wide community that sets you up for life, with incredible digital spaces and the opportunity to access the best uni and careers resources, helping you succeed success your way, proving your talent, building your confidence, and growing your network with our fully funded Zero Gravity membership. That's something that's looked a lot different this time last year when we both weren't working here. Obviously, working within a startup is such a dynamic role, because you see something grow from a relatively small start to something that's a massive, almost organizational level company in such a short space of time. And it's been really exciting to be a part of that so far. And I think with Tech for Good, you really feel like you're at one with the mission, even if there is a financial backing behind it. And this is going to be a business one day. Tech for Good means that it can be a business that you really feel quite a close connection with the mission, and feel like you're generating a real impact around the country every day. So I hope we haven't run too much over the time limit here. Haven't run
right on time, Tom, right on time.
Fantastic. So if there's any questions, then I'm happy to take those. We've also included a QR code there if anyone wants to check out anything more.
Perfect. No, thank you for that, Tom. That was super, super comprehensive and really exciting. A lot of the stuff that's going on in zero gravity, and yeah, the questions have kind of been flowing through. So someone asked, is there a grad scheme for postgrads as well? So obviously, you guys kind of just pioneered the internship at the moment. Are there any plans on the horizon to maybe do like a grad scheme as a follow-on?
Yeah, so a grad scheme is a really interesting one. I'm sure once we're past Series A and our next round of fundraising, we keep expanding on into that into work pathway. So at the moment, we're working with graduate employers like HSBC, KPMG, and we're also moving down the law tech sort of finance routes to get new organizations on board. But in terms of internal hiring, like a grad scheme is a great way to sort of progress that. And I imagine we'll aim to flip the script on that too, in terms of like making it more accessible and more relevant to the work you're doing. I personally went for a grad scheme that I didn't find too engaging, and I didn't feel like I was that connected to work every day. So I'd love to see, us do that in the next few years.
Noted, noted. Um, the next question I actually had for you was could you just elaborate on what Series A means for a lot of people that aren't familiar with like the startup terms?
Yes, for sure. So this is something that I learned myself not long ago either. It's essentially when a startup starts, and I imagine Ellie might impede on if I get anything wrong here. When a startup starts, you have an idea and you start building out a product around that. So our founder Joe built out the foundations of Zero Gravity with the last £200 of his student loan. And from there, you may have someone that wants to support you and provide some backing. And that will be normally your angel investor that will give you a little bit of money to support you. And then you'll move on to a pre-seed stage. So you're planting that tree. Essentially, you're getting more money around you, say maybe around £200,000 to provide some staff members to help you and start building out the team. And then you'll have your seed round where you'll move up to a much larger sum of money. So you can really start building out a company there. That's what we're on currently. And we had in November 2021 was our seed round. And then Series A is the next stage from there, where you're expected to grow once again, scale up the company and double the number of team members, but also really double the impact the company's making and the revenue too. So that's our next round that we are moving towards over this summer and into the 2024.
Noted, noted. Thank you for that breakdown. Charlotte, I believe this one is for you. As a young founder associate who does a lot of different stuff, how do you pick up all of those different skills and be confident executing all of this whilst you're learning on the job? So obviously the founder associate role being very, very dynamic and you're being thrown into lots of different things and you have to kind of learn on the go. How do you kind of navigate that?
Sure. Yeah, great question. And one I'm definitely still learning, for sure. I think learn on the job is the absolute definition of it. And just a bit of context to kind of where I've come from. I also, similar to Tom, started on a big grad scheme at TK Maxx, which was kind of just always the route that I thought I'd go down, kind of big corporate grad scheme, quite a pigeonholed job role. And I knew exactly what I was doing on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. But I was just a bit bored. And then I came across Jumpstart, kind of discovered startups. And I think I've learned so much more in the last 9 months at Zero Gravity than I did in the 2 years I was on my grad scheme, just because of you don't really learn something until you try it. And it's like you build that confidence by doing stuff, some of it working, some of it not, but ultimately like learning from it and seeing what are those skills that you maybe didn't realize you had, that you actually, when you put your hand to something, a lot of the time you can do it. And if you can't do it, there's people around you that can do it. And I think that's a massive like part of working in a startup for me that I love, is kind of learning from those people around you. Like it's such a high performance team of people that, particularly in Tech for Good, people that are here for a reason because they believe in the mission and they want to do it. But ultimately, you're learning from the best people around you. You're thrown in at the deep end. There's massive highs, massive lows that come with it. But ultimately, it's that learning curve is incredibly steep. And I think like confidence breeds confidence. So it's that kind of mindset of like, oh, I did that, I can do that. So yeah, that's I don't know if that answers the question, but yeah, still learning on that one myself personally.
Thank you for that. And a question I actually had with the founder associate one. So typically because founder associate is kind of like a niche role within startups, you know, the other roles you kind of really see the progression. So like for a data analyst, for example, you kind of know what the progression looks like. You're probably going to be a senior data analyst, maybe progress to engineer. With founder associate, could you kind of talk through some of the different options that are available as far as career progression goes, seeing as you're working in all these different departments as such?
Sure. Yeah. So I think for me, when I started the role, it was very much, I saw it going one of two ways. Firstly, it's kind of as I've mentioned, the exposure you have to all the different areas of the business. So working with the brand team, the product team, the ops team, the tech team, like there's so many different parts of the business. And as we mentioned earlier, as the business builds out as we go, you can kind of see opportunities cropping up as and when, and particularly as we head towards our next fundraising round and we're going to double in size, you can kind of immediately see where those holes are going to appear and where different sort of areas of the business might grow out and where different roles you might be interested in are going to appear. So I think that first option from founder associate is that kind of sideways movement of like, actually, this is the part of the job that I'm enjoying the most, that I want to specialize in. And I think that's the absolute beauty of startups, is if you have that inkling, you can act on it, you can speak to people, you can try new stuff, you can ultimately, there's that flexibility. Like Bex, who is the second hire here at Zero Gravity, started off as a marketing generalist, developed a real love for the kind of tech product side of stuff, bought loads of product books, did a few courses, really found her interest there, and is now a product manager, and really like moving forward in that space. I think that's a really good example of like, first of all, specializing in the role, which is something that I was definitely very open to when I started the role. Kind of the second path that I see is then kind of keeping in that generalist role, which I think is personally where I see myself, because I love kind of the chaos and the variety that comes with the role. And I think it's that kind of, having lots of plates spinning and lots of things on the go that kind of gives me my energy in the role. And it's kind of what I love about it. So I think the kind of progression there can kind of look into like general manager type roles, chief of staff type roles, kind of like keeping that kind of link with the CEO and the kind of being that touch point for lots of different areas of the business. So I think those are the two kind of avenues that I saw on starting, and I think those are still definitely the two most obvious for founder associate. But I think the third would also be, I just thought of that on the spot, if you like, as Ellie mentioned earlier, is that kind of exposure to founding a business. If that is something you're interested in, you do sort of experience firsthand everything that's involved with being a founder and starting a business. So yeah, that'll be the three avenues I kind of see.
No, thank you for that. The next question, I'm just trying to kind of sift through the questions because some of them are more general, so we can kind of answer towards the end. But this one talked about if there are any plans to kind of diversify the team within Zero Gravity, just from a diversity perspective, seeing as, you know, the whole aim is to kind of target students from low income backgrounds and ultimately hit that element of diversity. And sometimes it's a lot more encouraging for people to sign up to the platform if they do see people like them working on the platform. So are there any hiring plans at the moment, if that's something that you guys have insight into?
Yeah, go.
Yeah, this is a really interesting one. We actually, as a company, we've grown out obviously incredibly quickly, and with real scale. And we around 3 months ago, was it? We had a cultural review. So we did a big, basically, survey on what everyone was thinking about current processes in terms of our growth, in terms of operations and all of that sort of thing. And one thing that was really flagged was we're growing incredibly fast. But are we hiring diverse, like in a diverse way? Are we bringing on the people that we actually want to represent on our platform? And that's something we're trying to inherit as much as possible. When we were brought on, like it's a real challenge to balance those two things, like the quick growth and the recruitment processes. It's not something that we manage, having joined 6-7 months ago, but it's definitely something that's becoming more ingrained within our hiring process. But bearing in mind that it was at the start like 1-2 people that were managing this recruitment channel, it was obviously very much on their mind. But it's something that was quite hard to ingrain, especially in London, where Zero Gravity is based. Unfortunately, it's a very expensive place to live, and the talent pool here is majority wise, it is higher income, more affluent areas, and yeah, it's harder to recruit in that way. However, as we scale, there's more and more plans, more processes that are being put in place within our recruitment stream to really start ingraining what our values within the platform into that channel. As we've grown, we have brought on more people that are close to university age and closer to backgrounds that we represent through the platform. I myself went to a state school and come from an area of not particularly high income at all. So it's very much like bringing on more people as we grow and improving those processes. And also that point I made at the end around internal hiring. We have an extremely large talent pool of students that we can bring on once they graduate into the company directly. They've got all that known experience of what we do, how we operate, and they've also got that background that we're trying to represent through this company. But really great question, for sure.
No, thank you for that, and it's good to kind of see that it is on the agenda anyways, just with the culture of you kind of demonstrating that already. So I'm sure as you guys kind of like proceed to Series A and continue to grow, those will start to kind of pan out. But with that being said, there are a lot of questions here, guys. I do want to proceed to passing it over to Martha to talk through Vira Health, and then we'll kind of cover questions holistically at the end, guys. But keep the questions flowing. But I'll pass it over to you, Martha.
Cheers, thanks so much. Tom, can I control of the screen? Cheers. And yeah, I'm going to attempt to share as well, hopefully. Is that all good? Can everyone see that?
Yes, perfect. Thank you, Martha.
So it's probably going to be slightly less organized than Tom and Charlotte, so bear with me while I just like talk really quickly for 15-20 minutes. But yeah, basically I'm from Vira Health, which is a Femtech startup, and it's specifically a startup which is providing a solution for menopause symptoms and coping with menopause symptoms, which isn't necessarily something that I thought of as the first thing when I went into Femtech and thought about that. So hopefully we'll get everyone really like angry and excited about Femtech and menopause, because that's kind of my daily running life at the moment. So a bit about me, first of all. I've said this to so many people. I never thought I'd work in startups. I was like a diehard art student. I thought I'd go and work in like some edgy East London gallery. I just never really thought that I was planning on going into business at all. But as you can see, graduated in 2020, nothing was open, couldn't do anything. So I was thinking, what can I do? What can I do especially that's not only going to get me a job, let me move out of home, but also something that if I do want to either stay in startups or go back into the art world in like a few years or go into a different industry, what's a way to spend my time for the next few years, which is going to be really useful. And it's going to be something which is really valuable for my time and learning new skills. So yeah, that's how I came around to Jumpstart. I am like an ancient Jumpstarter. I was cohort 3 back in December 2020, and I've actually got 2 jobs through Jumpstart. So my first job was in February 2021, which was a first employee at a company called Lalo. And they are like a trendy boxed wine e-commerce company. So first employee, it's quite similar. Sorry if you can hear sirens, by the way, I live on a main road. It's quite similar to a founder's associate / generalist role. It's pretty much doing anything that needs doing at that time. At least my role was. It varies a lot from startup to startup. So it's just me and the 2 co-founders. And yeah, I was doing shipping, marketing, partnerships, kind of everything. It really went into overdrive when one of the co-founders started maternity leave like 2 months after I began at the startup. So then there was more going on, crazy times. But I ended up leaving that after around a year because I pivoted more into like an ops manager role. And I sort of over the course of the year realized that's maybe not exactly what I want to spend my whole career doing. Was thinking, how can I pivot? How can I change? I was more organizing like logistics and product launches, and that is so needed. Operations stress me out. I'm not that good at them. Some people are much better at them than me. So I went back to Jumpstart and was like, do you have any roles that are more commercial focused? Because I really like speaking to people. I like thinking about new deals and new connections. And luckily Vira was hiring a partnerships associate. So that's how I got my role there. And the other thing I was really looking for as well was a company with a slightly larger pool of employees, because I'd had that experience really up close of just 3 of us in a company for a year. And then I was like, well, what's it going to be like if I'm at a large company? And so there were 30 people when I joined, and now there are think over 40. So yeah, big old family. Yeah, what's Femtech? Femtech, you're going to get a lot of different chat about what Femtech is. People have very strong opinions, but for me, I pretty much think it boils down to companies addressing problems that disproportionately affect women and those with female bodies assigned female at birth. I'm just going to use the term women throughout the presentation for ease, and creating technological solutions to those issues. It's a word that's not been around for that long. It was founded in 2016 by the person who founded Clue, which is the period tracking app. And it was just really referring to this whole space, which was just really focused on female issues, female medical issues and bodily issues. So a lot of people are going to tell you that Femtech is really to do with women's health more than anything. I personally think it's a bit wider than that. I think there are a lot of apps and like software coming up at the moment, particularly to do with women's like financial wellness and financial literacy. And I think they're really worthwhile falling under the guise of Femtech because historically and socially, women haven't had as much opportunity or as much education around investing and around financial literacy. So that's why it is still a social problem that disproportionately affects women. But the things that are really pretty much indisputable and everyone agrees fall under Femtech are things like pregnancy and fertility, menstrual health, menopause, which is what I work in, but then things which are slightly less obvious maybe, which are things like mental health, because it affects women very differently to men. There's a lot of hormonal changes that take place in a woman's body that aren't taking place in men's bodies, and there's just not as much research on women's mental health. And also general health and wellness, because there are a lot of conditions and diseases that don't only affect female bodies, but they disproportionately affect female bodies, which I'll come on to later when we talk about menopause. This is just a few of the Femtech companies. They tend to be really UK and US based at the moment, but they are expanding like throughout the world. So Femtech, the main thing people are going to tell you is it's a rapidly expanding market. It was only like 134 million in 2013, but it's projected to be worth 75 billion in 2027. So really exciting chance to be in a space where there are just new companies receiving funding all the time. So you might have noticed the title is Femtech a dirty word? That's because a lot of people don't like it. And there is some conjecture on whether we should still be using it. The first point is that it's kind of obvious. It's, do we still need fem anything? There are some people who find the topic of a Femtech company and a Femtech space to be like quite infantilizing, and say it's the same way of, in some people don't really like women in business. It's like, it's just people in business. We shouldn't be playing at like the kids' table of something. But my personal opinion is, while we don't have gender equity, gender equality, while we still need the word feminism, we still need the words like Femtech. But the other problem with Femtech is something which is harder to figure out, which is, are we mindful that we're not just creating more problems? So Femtech is addressing these problems and providing solutions, right? But it is so easy for companies to just say they're creating a solution to a problem, really just to sell women more stuff. And that is not what sustainable and moral Femtech is about. It is not just, obviously there's room for greed in any company, but it is about creating solutions to the problems. So why do you want to work in Femtech? Why do I like working in Femtech? Because I care about women's rights, because I want to spend all day thinking about women's rights, women's health, women's issues. And I think something which we're going to see in Femtech, hopefully over the next 5 to 10 years, is the Femtech space at the moment is pretty like caters to pretty white middle class people, because it's been easy for companies to do that. And I think, but we're getting some really good Femtech companies coming up in the UK and especially in the US at the moment, which are focused on those intersections of like different socioeconomic positions, different abilities, different races. And I think that's going to be something which changes a lot in Femtech in the next few years. Also, like I said, it's an expanding industry. It's looking very different from how it did like 3 years ago. It's going to look even more different to how it does now in 3 years. There's also a lot of emerging research happening in Femtech. So part of the problem that we're trying to address, especially in healthcare, is that women's issues are drastically under-researched. Like, I work in menopause, which is a massive life stage. And even now, there are so few big research papers about menopause because people just haven't really cared enough to research it. Before 2010, there were barely any. And even now, all the menopause companies in the UK are still using one of the big three, pretty much. So we really see these research papers, now that people are paying attention, coming out like year on year. And I think if you want to be in an industry where the goalposts are like moving all the time, and like you're becoming aware of new problems, you're becoming aware of new solutions, it's really exciting. Also, might not be important to you, and I'm still wrestling with how important it is to me, but Femtech kind of obviously tends to be really female dominated as an industry. I think obviously we've got fantastic men, fantastic male feminists working in our company and working in the space in general, but obviously women's rights tend to draw the attention of women. And I personally really enjoy working for female managers, working for female bosses, working amongst women. It's just a nice environment. So now I get to talk about menopause and Vira Health, and yeah, bear with me while I might get a bit annoyed because my job just kind of necessitates being annoyed at things and and wanting to change things pretty much. So Vira Health is on a mission to make personalized menopause care the norm. We deliver like immediate relief from the menopause symptoms that you're experiencing, but also in an aim to reduce the long-term impact. And that's what I was referring to earlier with general health and fitness, which is there are conditions that disproportionately affect women. So diseases like osteoporosis, dementia, diabetes can have a really disproportionate effect on older women, depending on the care that they receive during menopause and how their body is treated during menopause, which is not something I knew at all going into this job. So a bit about Vira Health. We have been a registered company since 2020. We've raised 2 rounds of funding so far, 2 big rounds, seed round and a Series A. And we've released our app, which is our main thing going on iOS and also on Android. And a lot of our year last year was building up Stella Plus, which is our pharmaceutical offering to do with menopause. And we launched that in November. It was a big focus in the company. It was like all hands on deck going on. So it's really exciting that it's now live and I can sell it pretty much. But our plans for this year, hopefully, are expanding into the US market, because healthcare is just a completely different landscape in the US and the way that it's treated. So it'll be really interesting to go into that. So why menopause? Pretty much, I had no idea what menopause was, and I'm not going to do the whole ins and outs of menopause, but menopause is pretty much your body declining in estrogen and working towards the point where you stop your periods and stop being fertile. So what people think of as the very long stage and what they normally call menopause is actually called perimenopause. Most people just call it menopause. So the age when it happens, I've written 45 to 55. I know several people at my work and who I work with who've hit menopause in their late 30s. It can really happen at any point, and it lasts for 10 years, and almost no one is prepared because we're never taught about it. Also, it's got 40 different symptoms, and 13 million women in the UK go through menopause, and only 7% get the care they need. It's a massive deal. We don't know why. We are not taught when we're younger how big a deal menopause is. And I remember personally when my mom was going through menopause, it just wasn't a conversation in the house. And like, obviously now I've started working at this job and she's like, oh yeah, well, I was going through like this symptom, this symptom, this symptom, it's terrible. And so now we can finally talk about it, but it's crazy that that wasn't an open conversation at the time. I work on the B2B side of partnerships, because one of our primary models is selling our product to businesses so that their employees can get it as a free benefit. So I think a lot about how we're helping women at work, what are the impacts of menopause on women at work, and they're really kind of dire. So people who are going through menopause, 60% of them who are working feel negatively impacted. That can be due to the symptoms themselves. It can be due to like bad working environments. I think there's an accepted point of view in the menopause space that menopause is really like the last thing that's openly banter in the workplace. Like in the same way that sort of 20 years ago, I mean, there's still a lot that goes on underneath like the carpet, but in the same way that 20 years ago, like the most horrific sexism would just be casual chat in the office, menopause is still really joked about, and it's kind of really dehumanizing in a way. Also, a lot of people have absenteeism, like they're going to miss work because of their symptoms being so bad, because they're going to doctor's appointments, because it's really hard to get doctor's appointments when you're going through menopause. And the thing that's really like rubbish and just makes me very upset is 12% of people going through menopause are going to resign from their job because of their menopause. That is insane to me. And that is, again, due to the symptoms, meaning they can't cope with work, due to an unhelpful work environment. It can also be, one of the symptoms of menopause is anxiety and low confidence. And if you've not been correctly diagnosed as that being due to your menopause, you're just going to think you're rubbish at your work, and you're going to lose all that confidence, and you're just going to not want to go to work anymore. And it is terrible, because when you think about who are the women who are going through menopause and resigning from their jobs, it's women in their 40s pretty much. Where are they going to be at in their careers? They're going to be heading right on into the senior level and be trying to go at their peak of their careers at the C-suite, and then they don't have support. And we can give it all this chat about we need more female CEOs, we recruit, like we do so much active recruiting to get women in seniority, and then we're not paying attention to this really massive life stage that like 50% of the people working are going to go through. And it's been proven to have a really negative impact on your performance at work, on your confidence at work. I mean, workplaces are finally waking up. You might have seen in the news across the past year, there was a lot more news coverage of menopause in workplaces. That's kind of died down a bit now, but hopefully the general trend is up and up and up, because it is just, we're not going to see like gender equity in senior roles without paying attention to menopause. So here's my sales hat on. I do a lot of pitches day to day, but I will try to tone down that tone now. Stella is our product, and it consists of an app and a pharmaceutical offering. So Stella, the app, if you imagine good menopause care, or the best menopause care as we think of it, as like this pyramid, and at the bottom layer you've got lifestyle and behavior change. In the middle layer you have HRT, which is your menopause medication, and the top layer you have like specialist stuff. So our app is the lifestyle and behavior change portion. We believe, and a lot of other people believe, that that is the core, the rock of menopause care for a few reasons. It's proven to work, it's low cost, it's low risk, it's easy to start. It's also, like I said before, there are around 40 different menopause symptoms. A lot of them are going to interlink, and a lot of them are going to affect each other. And so you might have symptoms like insomnia, anxiety, and brain fog, right? And you might be thinking, oh, I need to get HRT and like try and get those in order. But you might be going on to a lifestyle and behavior change app like Stella and say, okay, I'm really going to get my sleep in order, because that's just something I've got to deal with. And you might, through like journaling or like a sleep routine or not having screens in your room, really get your insomnia under control. And then you might notice that your anxiety and your brain fog is actually getting a bit better, because it's not being negatively impacted by your sleep. So then you might still cope with it, but they might all come down a bit. And then you might avoid a doctor telling you to just take antidepressants, because that's going to make you feel better. And then maybe your worst symptom is hot flushes. And then you think, oh, okay, I'm going to take HRT that's going to cater to the hot flushes. Everyone is individual. It's really complex. And so doing that lifestyle change is just really useful to work out where your symptoms are at and where the really serious ones are. So that's one example is Stella. When people come on to Stella, the app, they get taken through this onboarding quiz, and they rank all the symptoms that they're coping with at the moment. And then the app designs a personalized plan for that person based on their between 2 and 3 most severe symptoms that they're coping with. And throughout that plan, they receive lessons, and those lessons are going to tell them why this is happening, basically, what hormones in the body and what changes in the body are causing these symptoms, and also different things they can try out to help these symptoms. And there's a lot of, one of our co-founders has a PhD in behavioral science. So there's a lot of like psychological bits in the app that encourage you to set habits and encourage you to keep those habits. And then there are also resources in the app, like webinars and articles, and you can talk one-to-one to a coach. So it's really like, if you've ever used like Calm or Headspace or Noom, it's like that, but for menopause pretty much. But there are other things that kind of just can't be taken care of with lifestyle and behavior change. So that's where the HRT comes in. It is really, really difficult to get HRT in the UK, and that you're either going to lose out on a lot of time and effort or a lot of money. On the NHS, getting HRT from like going to your doctor and saying, I have menopause and I need HRT, it can take 9 months to properly have the HRT in your hand. And then even then, last year, there was a real shortage with a lot of HRT. And so it depended on where you lived, whether or not you would have it available. I remember someone I work with was in that situation, and she sort of lost access to her prescription. Obviously, with any long-term prescription, if you stop taking it for a while, there's going to be issues. And so she and all her friends were on like this illicit WhatsApp group and like running around all the pharmacies and like driving to pharmacies like an hour away just to get the right HRT. It was mayhem, and it was like all across the UK. But yeah, it was terrible. And then if you do decide to go private, stupidly expensive. It can cost £300 on average for an initial consultation for a menopause diagnosis at a private clinic. So that's why we made Stella Plus, which is pretty much the in-between. So you can do an online consultation with all your medical history and then get prescribed the HRT that you need, and also the HRT that's available to you and that's right for you. And then it's delivered to your door. So it is that kind of in-between, and it works on a subscription model. Last slide, I promise. So day in life partnership associate, it's different at every company. My role varies a lot, like month to month, depending on where we're at in this cycle and what our goals are. And it also depends on your team and the makeup of your team. So at the moment, because Stella Plus has only been out and been fully launched since November, that's kind of only when we started like really like pedal to the floor selling it. So that's where I'm at the moment. So most of my day, I think I sent 180 emails today to random people at companies being like, do you want to try Stella? Do you want it for your company? Luckily, I was using like a software, but it was still 180 like clicks and fills. But yeah, a lot of research, a lot of evaluation, outreach. Like I said, a lot of pitches, a lot of saying over and over again, well, this is why it works, and this is the pricing, and this, and yes, I can take you through that, and just being really sort of on it and like client facing. Contracts, working with the marketing team is very key to my role, especially when we're looking at linking up all our different like B2B channels and making sure we're shouting enough about them to our community, but also like to everyone on LinkedIn as well. Being a startup, there's a lot going on. So I got put on a special project like back in September. Our co-founder decided she wanted to set up a Shopify store where we could cater products that would help menopause, like moisturizers, resistance bands. And it was kind of just oh, Martha, you used to work in an e-commerce startup. Shopify, do it. I'm like, okay, great. So then like 2 months of my job last year, amongst other things, was just figuring out how to set up a Shopify store and doing the user research around it. And it was really interesting, and I learned a lot through it. And it was nice to be on, like, go back to my sort of e-commerce roots from the other side and setting it up. One thing I don't do a lot of in my current role is account management and sort of really nurturing those existing clients. That is it's quite common for partnership associates to do account management. And the reason I don't is because I have a colleague who's super, super interested in account management on my team, and I am less interested in it, and I'm more interested in like the business development and the outreach. And that's the thing in startups, like we've been able to structure our roles just according to what we're interested in, where our strengths are, and everything like that. These little bits in green at the bottom were basically me saying what I want to get better at this year. As you may have, well, hopefully you haven't gathered, I'm not very good with numbers. I'm not very analytical by nature. It's something that I'm having to continually learn, but I really want my career to grow into like more on the growth strategy and the business development side. So I need to get experience and get better at doing those kind of things. So a lot more things that I want to get experience with this year are growth strategy, financial modeling, and just general analytics, because that's always useful. But yeah, I think in general, being a partnerships associate is a lot of speaking to people, a lot of outreach, a lot of dead ends, especially in like an early stage-ish startup, because we are still quite early stage in selling it. But yeah, I really enjoy it. I really enjoy how much I get to speak to external people, and because you're getting that feedback every single time you do a pitch, and you get other people who are excited and angry about your cause. If I was working as a partnership associate for a company I didn't really care about the mission, probably be a bit harder, but I enjoy it. But yeah, thank you for listening to all of that.
Thank you so much for that, Martha. That was super, super comprehensive and yeah, very insightful as well, because I didn't really know that there was like an industry that kind of existed for this. So it's very insightful to kind of understand, and I can appreciate the frustrations as well when you're trying to kind of solve a social issue, but then also kind of like, you know, work on a business as well. So it must be really challenging, but it seems like you're taking it in strides. The questions are coming in. So one of the questions was, what are kind of the incentives for a partnership associate? So, you know, is there like a commission structure for when you sell the product successfully, or you onboard a customer? What does that look like, if you kind of care to share a bit of that?
Yeah, incentives, like my incentives personally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's something which we actually implemented recently. We had a new commercial officer come on in September, and she made the point that technically a large part of what I'm doing is a sales role, and it's kind of really common for there to be sales incentives. So we put in a sales incentive, like just a monetary one per company we onboard. And that's really been something that's only come about when it's really been about like, okay, how many people can we get in the door like every single week? But before then, it was it's strange to say, but when you're in a company which is relatively small, and when you are someone who wants to do your job well and want to see the mission succeed, yeah, the incentive was kind of like, oh my god, we've got like this brand who we've actually heard of. That's insane. Like, that's so cool. But yeah, financial incentive is always nice.
Now, I guess like what I kind of take from that is that when you care about the product and you care about the company, like the incentive is kind of like, it's like an afterthought, really and truly. Someone asked, what does the progression look like for you from a partnerships perspective? Like, what does that look like in terms of, does it go to like a commercial officer or business development, or what's that like?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's at the moment, there's obviously not been like a previous path in this company for me. I was like the first partnerships person to come on board. I'm currently the only partnerships person who is junior, so there isn't like a progression that's already been carved out. What would it would probably look like? I mean, getting involved in more strategy and moving up to being a commercial officer, and then moving up to probably having like a business development type role, rather than just being on the ground doing sort of sales every day, pretty much. But again, as Tom and Charlotte will know, startups, you kind of go where you're needed, and I am only in this sort of business development side of my job because I told everyone I really want to do business development and I really like this. And so I could have easily ended up more on the marketing side. I interviewed for a marketing job actually when I first came to Vira, and I just happened to say in my interview like, oh, what you're doing with like B2B is so cool. I'd really love to get involved in it. And I said, okay, well, be a partnerships associate instead. So just voice what you want to do pretty much, because you're most useful to the group when you're doing something you care about and something that you're good at.
Nice. No, I really love that takeaway, because I think sometimes when we kind of go into these interviews, we're kind of autopilot just on the role we've applied for, and we tend to be a bit timid and not really apply our own perspective. And it seems like you kind of did that, and that landed you in something that you like even more. So yeah, that's a really valuable tip. Someone asked, what do your most active users love slash not love about the product, seeing as it's sort of in its new phase at the moment? So there must be a lot of feedback, right?
Yeah, definitely. Everyone always says they love our coaches, which is like our one-to-one person who's not a medical person. She's just, well, the two people we have working for us are kind of like, they both started their careers in customer service and have learned a lot about menopause. I think people love them because, I mean, it's just something you don't really get with a lot of medical offers. Like, I know from like just anecdotes of what these people sometimes talk about with our coaches when they've wanted to share it, which is some people say, I really don't get this about the app, because obviously we're not necessarily always dealing with the most tech literate customers. So it's someone to bounce that off. But then also some of the conversations look like, for God's sake, I've had the worst day. You know, my like teenage son who I was telling you about last week, I screamed at him again, and then I felt really guilty, and then I cried. And so it's just this like sounding board like a friend. So that's what people really tend to respond to. I think in terms of not liking things, I think some of our webinars, I know everyone's got their favorite and their least favorite person who does a webinar, I think, when you're a customer on that. So there are some people who are like, I prefer this yoga teacher to this yoga teacher. And so that's probably the feedback we get the most often. That's down to personal preference. I think it'd be really interesting when, because because we've just started a lot of B2B, like big workplace trials. Like we're currently working with companies like Barber and like Princes, who make the like tin tuna as Princes. And so we've got a lot of like working women who are getting it through their company on them recently. So we have a really unique opportunity to actively do user research and like feedback in those surveys, which is something we're planning to do in the next 2 months pretty much. So I'll come back to you on that.
No, thank you for that. That's super useful anyways. And you guys can connect with Martha to kind of follow the journey of Vira. Another question, what is the learning support and career development that is available for someone who is new to the industry but has the skills to do it in a startup setting? So I guess like in your position, this is kind of like the first partnerships role, junior one. So like, you know, how do you kind of go about getting professional development when it's a fairly new role?
Yeah, honestly, sounds lame, ask for it. I recently had like an hour and a half personal development session with my manager, just because I said, there are some things that I really want to focus on this year, like can we set this aside? And I think, especially, I can only speak from experience from like my industry and like the Femtech industry, it is such a nurturing place. I think there's a real tone of everyone being there for this common good and like supporting even your competitors' successes, like within reason. But everyone I know who, not just my manager, but people who are, you know, slightly older than me working in a different role, will always have something useful to tell me. And I think that's what I've really gained by moving to a slightly bigger company. It's this whole like 360 of people, and just asking at any point what you can learn from them, both in like strict role progression, but also in general knowledge progression. One of the people I've learned the most from is a doctor, and obviously I would never be a doctor, but she is our medical director, and I learn things from her every single day about how to deal with patients and talk to people. And I think that's a lot of transfer that comes over to my role. And as well, people outside your company, just on LinkedIn, and people who cross your path, there's always something to learn from anyone.
No, thank you for that. Another person asked, can you tell us more about your expansion into the US, if that's something that you kind of care to share?
Can share a few things. So it's basically, at the moment, the app is kind of available anywhere. It's only in English, but you can download it from pretty much anywhere in the world. What is more difficult to expand into other countries is like the pharmaceutical side. So what we're really working on is finding a US provider that can, within our like costs and our boundaries, supply our pharmaceutical stateside. And then, I mean, the US healthcare system is, I mean, it is so difficult for me to understand. It is so complex in terms of like all their co-pays and like insurance and everything like that. But what we're trying to do is get offered by insurance companies so that people can like get Stella. That is all
as an add-on kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. No, sounds good. Sounds like a lot of exciting developments ahead. And it seems like your role is probably going to evolve as that expansion continues to take place. This one's a question kind of for the broader cohort. In you guys' experience, how is the work-life balance in startups? I feel like there's a stereotype of it being really full on and 24/7, but would be interested to know if you think this is true. So Martha, do you want to take the floor on that one first and then pass over to Zero?
Yeah, it definitely can be true. I think I've had months where my work-life balance has maybe not been the best, and I've had months where it's been really good. I think there's always going to be kind of an element of it's all hands on deck, like, and if you care again about the mission you're going for, it's not just sort of clocking out at 5 or 6 p.m. However, there is something to be said for, in startups, but in any job, about expressing your own boundaries. And I definitely have, in the only a few years I've been working, learned a lot about where my limits are, and I remember I was really busy around September and October, and I remember saying like, yeah, no, I can do this for like, I'd say like 4 more weeks, but like after that I'm going to need to like take a break. And I think just expressing that to people has been really useful for me. And if you're in a good company where people care about you, they will pay attention.
Nice. What about you, Tom, Charlotte? Any input on that?
Yeah, I just completely reiterate everything Martha just said. I think like a lot of the time it comes down to how you feel about what you're doing. So like when kind of work-life balance does get a bit hectic, and when kind of things kind of are quite full on, it's like actually personally, and I think Tom would agree with this, you don't kind of resent it in the same way you would in a job where you don't kind of care about what you're doing. And I think that's a massive perk of startups in general. It's a massive perk of Tech for Good for us. But I think also it's like what I was saying about the culture and the kind of how you see that in the day-to-day of those like kind of values that everybody like sticks to. Those are the things that actually, when times do get a little bit more difficult, you really see come through. And it's like actually everyone pulls together when they need to pull together, and you do kind of get acknowledged and rewarded for that. And it's like you can really see the tangible impact of that. So I think I'd say kind of culture, having that balance, knowing like as Martha said, knowing when to kind of push back, and kind of having that mutual respect of your colleagues that like that's going to be okay. And I think also like for us as well, it's like you're working with a group of really like-minded people. We're like a very social company. I'm sure loads of companies say that, but like it's kind of you have those kind of like work friendships and those work relationships that mean that like when times are a bit more difficult and like work-life balance might be a little bit more out the window, it's fine because you quite enjoy it and you're with people you enjoy spending time with. So yeah.
Anything to add to that, Tom?
I think not too much really. Charlotte's really touched on everything really well there. I think for me, working within a graduate scheme and the company I was at before this, I was doing the 9 till 5, very typical, sometimes less than 9 till 5. It'd be like go home at 4:30 sorts of thing. Whereas now, sometimes the work-life balance does tip over the edge sometimes, and I work later because I've got more to do. But personally, like I love it because it's something that I really want to work towards and I really want to achieve. Like I feel like I'm so directly involved in the impact we're having that I'm quite happy to occasionally do that extra mile. But at the same time, just to reflect what Charlotte was saying, when it comes to that situation, there is the support alongside you to really make sure you get the most out of it and you're not like overworked. And if it comes to the next day and you need to balance it out with some extra time to rest, then that is completely appreciated, because it's people that are like-minded. Productivity comes essentially from a group of people that are healthy and are happy. It doesn't come from people that are overworked and stressed. And I feel like a lot of the senior people at my last company were overworked and stressed, whereas the junior people were underworked and uninterested. So I think there's that sort of balance there where if you're happy and you're healthy, you're going to love what you're doing and you're going to thrive in that situation. And occasionally you might do a 9 p.m. night, but there might be a McDonald's involved too. So it's a balancing act for sure.
And I think that's kind of the beauty of startups, right? Like when everyone's kind of, really invested in the mission, everyone together is kind of working towards it and putting the late nights together. Whereas like typically with a lot of corporate roles, because it's quite hierarchical, it's either sometimes like the seniors are kind of off while the juniors are doing a lot of work, or the seniors are doing a lot of work and then the juniors aren't really involved as much. So you kind of have that different dynamic. A few questions just for the about the broader Jumpstart program. Ellie, maybe you can jump in on this one. Someone said, I'm currently in the US, shout out to our US base, and have a bachelor's degree in tech. I have a high interest in relocating to the UK. Can this program help with that? Either it is helping with finding a remote role or with visas. So I don't know, Ed, if you kind of want to touch up on that and maybe clarify a few things.
Yeah, for sure. So one thing to clarify is we can't guarantee visa sponsorship through the Jumpstart program, which is something a bit unfortunate at the moment, but so that we can't really cater to more international students in that way, but just like something that like startups in terms of like being like low on like money and like budgets and stuff like that, we can't guarantee on every single cohort. On a startup by startup basis, they occasionally can offer visa sponsorships, but otherwise you can still apply for the program, and if you're able to like attain a visa elsewhere or negotiate visas with your startups, then it is possible. And also, like I said, you can apply for remote positions as well through Jumpstart.
Perfect. No, thank you for covering that, Ellie. And I just saw that Tom and Charlotte had to drop off, guys, but they've dropped their LinkedIns in the chat as well. That was super, super insightful. So you guys should definitely check out the Zero Gravity platform, because it seems like there's a lot of stuff going on there just to kind of provide more opportunities for people to access, opportunities of employers as well as like universities as well. So really a lot of great stuff going on there. Another question about the Jumpstart program. Someone asked, is it appropriate for experienced hires who are looking to kind of transition into the world of tech? So maybe you can kind of speak about the transition program.
Yeah, for sure. So we actually don't just run a graduate program. We also run a career switcher program. This is for people who maybe have more like 3+ years worth of experience, and their role is basically to help you, transition from like maybe the corporate world or from one startup to another. And they're just for like more experienced hires and like positions. So a typical role that lots of us switchers go into is like a chief of staff position. And that's actually a role that you often see a founder associate progress into as a startup becomes like a little bit bigger. So it's kind of doing similar work to what a founder's associate does, but like overseeing people and managing people alongside it, and like having a lot more involvement in like the business strategy and stuff like that.
Nice. I'm so sorry, Ellie, because these questions are all for you now.
That's okay.
Someone said, can you give any suggestions for candidates applying for Jumpstart program to be a successful candidate?
Yeah, for sure. I'd say there isn't like a textbook successful candidate for Jumpstart, but there are a couple of things that we definitely look for in applications. One of those, and I would say is the most important one, is evidence of proactivity. So we care a lot more about sort of, I guess, unconventional experiences than your typical work experiences. So like we care more about maybe if you started your own side hustle, or if you've got this really like engaging YouTube channel that has like a loads of followers, or you've done like a really successful Depop shop, or you founded a society at university that's had like a ton of impact. We care a lot more about that than maybe like an internship you did in your second year at uni, because this sort of stuff and like the proactivity really shows just like that you are someone who, I guess, goes above and beyond in lots of situations and knows how to like make an impact. And that's something that like startups really look for. They want someone who can roll up their sleeves and just like go and like run with a task without little like guidance and things like that. So I'd say proactivity is one of those. Other than that, we also look for sort of written comms. We look for people who are really hardworking. So if you can sort of give evidence of that on your CV or any sort of way, like, so for example, you can show you're hardworking, but if you're working in a bar job whilst also working at university, that shows that you're able to like work really hard and do well in your exams as well as like be successful in work. And so I just say sort of like things like that: written comms, proactivity, being hardworking are all stuff that we really look out for in Jumpstart candidates.
Nice, thank you for that, Ellie. This question is for Martha, and I think it's a really important one actually. What criteria should a candidate have while selecting a role in a startup?
Firstly, it's going to be kind of different for everyone, and you're going to change your mind and learn and have different things you want over the like first 3 years of your career, and it's going to be different every year. I think when you're interviewing with them, honestly, liking the interviewer is way more important than you might think. You are going to be working with these people, and I think the way that we look at probation in jobs is really one-sided, and we're often thinking like, oh my god, am I good enough for this job? It's also to figure out if you like the company and if they support you and you feel like you can thrive there. There are a few like really key questions you can ask in an interview. I'm all over like interview TikTok, so there's always like great like TikToks about like what questions should I be asking a hiring manager in an interview, and I'm sure Ellie has some really key ones as well. But it's basically like making sure you're going to be able to grow there, making sure you're going to be looked after, as well as being able to contribute to the company. Obviously aligning with the mission, super important, and figuring if the role is right for you, pretty much.
Perfect. No, thank you for that. A bit of admin-y one for you, Ellie. I've applied this week for the graduate program. How long would it take to hear a response back from my application?
Sure. Yeah. Well, it depends on which cohort you've selected to like join. Basically, you should expect to hear max 3 weeks before your chosen cohort start date. We'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. But if you haven't chosen to like join a cohort, I guess until like the November cohort this year, you won't hear back for a little while because we've got plenty of cohorts coming up before then. But if you can't apply for one that's coming up really soon, you should expect to hear back really soon.
Perfect. No, thank you for that, Ellie. It seems like there are no more questions. Oh, no. As soon as I said that, and people started dropping. Oh, it said they applied for the February cohort. Okay, then that's kind of covered. And maybe you kind of just want to speak generally to all the programs at Jumpstart as well, just before we kind of wrap up.
Yeah, for sure. So like I mentioned, we run our graduate cohort. The next one is coming up in February. So yeah, if you apply for the February cohort, you should expect to hear in the next week or so about the status of your application. We run graduate programs every 1 to 2 months. So you can apply on a rolling basis whenever you want and whatever like time of the year suits you. We also run a career switches program, which I touched on earlier, and we run that a few times per year. And we've also recently launched a sales/commercial program, which is launching in just about a week and a half's time. And this is for anyone who's looking to get involved in like a sales or commercial role. So thinking like sort of sales development representatives or like account executives and things like that in a startup space. And it's a really like, I think, exciting space to be in. And it's our first ever cohort. So if you have 0 to 3 years worth of experience, you can apply for that program on our website or through the Beyond Education job platform as well.
Nice, nice. No, but thank you guys so much for tuning into this one. This one was a very long session and it was super engaging with all the questions. Thank you, Martha, for delving into Femtech and your role. And we also appreciate the Zero Gravity guys as well coming along. And of course, thank you so much, Ellie, for bringing Jumpstart to the forefront of our community as well. And we look forward to more events with you guys